This was the insertion of armed, prepared, trained rioters that were inserted from outside, many of them Kurds coming into Kermanshah, the Kurdish district in the west, and then others were the MEK, the Mujahideen al-Qa'id, and they had come in, and the aim was to be as extremely violent as possible. I think I described it before, how it actually worked, but it was an attempt to really set on fire sort of these groups, collect groups, and then through violence and through having snipers high up, fire at the security forces, and the security forces never knowing where the shots come from. It's a myth that you know where shots are coming from. In my experience, I've been under fire. You don't know. And so they started firing back, assuming that these were the people, and people were killed. Innocent people were killed in that process. That's what they wanted. They wanted to turn this into a riotous event. And to a certain extent, they succeeded. And then Iran turned the surprise on its head, cut off the internet, cut off international calls, and cut Starlink, which the American and Western intelligence all said, it can't be done. It couldn't have happened. It wasn't possible. Starlink will go on for good. No, it was cut. And some estimates of 40,000 terminals went dark. And in fact, the Iranians were able then to identify the terminals. And so they started rounding up and collecting all of these cells that were involved in creating the appearance of a riot. It was, of course, there were, of course, a real demonstration at the beginning. And that had been, if you like, triggered at the time of the Mar-a-Lago talks with Netanyahu on the 28th of December. They crashed the value of the rial by a huge amount, 30 to 40% in a day, by market operations. We've seen this before, short selling of a currency and then crashing the value. And that caused many of the merchant class, the bazaris, they lost their business model. They just couldn't do business with us. And so they did protest. But these protests were about economic mismanagement. And I think there was a fair complaint. I mean, as far as I know, Iran, if you like, Pezeshkian government, it should have had swap agreements. That's what you do when you get an attack on your currency. You have a swap agreement with China who will come in and buy your currency and restore the value of it. That's what they're all about. But as far as I know, that didn't happen. And they still haven't got themselves. Economic mismanagement was the weakness that the West already exploited reasonably successfully, but then the whole thing collapsed because then it was shown there was no substance to these demonstrations. The demonstrations of Bazaris were not demonstrating against the Islamic Republic. They were demonstrating against bad governments dating back to the Rouhani era.
Wow. Before the Starlink was disabled, is it fair to assume that Iranian intelligence services were listening to it, so they knew the instructions coming from Langley and from Tel Aviv to their agents in the streets?
Well, I suspect, yes. And if it wasn't the Iranians listening to it, I think it was the Chinese listening to it, because I think that technology actually comes. First of all, the electronic warfare, the mechanism that was used to, if you like, jam the Starlink, probably were those huge masts that Russia brought in. But I think the actual technique, and yes, they were listening to it afterwards, and they were identifying some of the Starlink terminals. And there are pictures, you probably may have even seen them, of large staffs of Starlink terminals being rounded up and being seized by the authorities as they sort of got rid of it. But I just emphasize, these were not protests in the normal word of the way.
Right.
This was the insertion of people externally directed to create very violent riots. And they did that by attacking innocent people and then creating a hubbub around that, which brought in the security forces. Meanwhile, there was a gunman in the roof. Maidan is an exact example of this technique in operation. And Maidan, that created, if you like, the revolution that followed.
What did Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump plan and plot at Mar-a-Lago? Did they plan this very event, and were they led to believe that this conflagration would grow to such magnitude that the Ayatollahs would depart?
Yes, this is, I mean, it was based on false intelligence. The intelligence remained for them. It's still the case in parts of the United States. The intelligence assessment was that Iran was a house of cards, and if the Ayatollah was killed or there was an attack on the establishment, on the IRGC and the Basij and those elements of it, the whole structure would implode and crash, and it was going to be like Syria is today, a complete empty space of anarchy. And I think that was the intention, but they misread it, because what is clear that during this whole process, despite the propaganda that says, oh no, there were sort of problems and everything, actually the leadership, there were no defections. There were no defections in the IRGC, no defections from the army, and there were no defections from the Basij. Even Israelis have to admit that was the case. The regime didn't wobble under this attack at all, and which is probably why Trump is having second thoughts about what to do next.
What does Trump still propose that the Pentagon do? I mean, is he so emboldened by the abduction of President Maduro that he thinks he can do the same thing in Tehran?
Well, not quite, but almost, yes. He wants a quick, in, bang, out operation, very quick, plays well, wonderful, headlines. He wants something short and sweet and clean. And this is the dilemma that he faces with this. What one can discern from sort of examining the Israeli press, who are quite distraught about, that they thought it was going to happen on the 14th of January, and they got a message saying it's not going to happen. And they don't know quite what finally changed his mind. But yes, earlier on, they know that Trump had wanted to assassinate the supreme leader, not to kidnap him, but just to kill him. And I think, that it probably hasn't completely gone from Trump's thinking, because what I hear is that the address by the supreme leader on Friday, in which he attacked the American involvement in these demonstrations and then called Trump a criminal, as one thing that Trump does not like is to be mocked or disrespected. And I think he felt that was disrespectful to him. And he's apparently very angry. But the problem is the Israelis clearly don't have the intelligence to mount a decapitation attack on Iran. They just don't have that intelligence. So the only thing they can offer Trump, I think, at this time, is a generalized attack on Iran. I.e., they try and attack the IRGC and the Basij leadership and the centers of communication. But I imagine that some in the Pentagon are saying to them, well, they're not going, those buildings will be empty. They're not going to sit there waiting to be attacked. Those buildings will be empty. What are you going to gain by that? And the main concern is that Iran has said absolutely explicitly through various channels that it has to the Americans, if we are attacked by Israel or by you in any way, decapitation or any other form of attack, we will go to all-out war, and we will attack American bases, and we will attack Israel, and it will be a full, no holds barred, we will go all the way in this. And what is more, we'll shut down the Hormuz Strait, and that will be for months. You will have no oil passing in through to the Western society. So that is what they have said. Now, Israel is trying to put the best gloss on it and is saying, well, perhaps Trump is just waiting, and when everything dies down and people come out again in normal life, then he'll go and do a sudden attack and try and kill the Ayatollah. But I think Iran is quite clear. If that happens, it'll be full all-out war. And I don't think, and one of the reasons for hesitation, I think, was that actually Netanyahu was pulling back before the 14th of January when this attack was supposed to happen, because he was saying, Israel did not have enough air defense systems after the earlier 12-day war exchange with Iran, that they were short of air defenses and that they might suffer huge losses as a consequence. So I think there was a certain failure of will on the part of Netanyahu, And according to the Israeli press, that Witkoff sort of pushed very much for shifting from an, if you like, because there was no quick in out like Maduro. I mean, he's not going to go in and get the Ayatollah and take him out to New York. So that's just not going to happen. So all that he could offer would be the type of war that would result in Iran taking an all-out war approach to Western bases in the region. And those bases are not well defended. They have not been defended. They were put there on the basis that Iran didn't have the missiles to attack them, that, they didn't need to have proper air defense systems. They were, out far away, so it was safe to put them there. Now they've turned in two sort of hostages to fortune, because Iran can and has warned it will attack them and will destroy them. If they are attacked, there will be war. And so there should be no doubts about it. But still, people in America and in West, the propaganda is amazing. Oh no, it's ready to fall at any moment. Iran is about to implode. It's about to go. They don't broadcast, they don't even notice that after the turning point, which was about on the 8th or 9th, when they turned off the communications and it went quiet, they haven't noticed there were millions on the streets of Tehran supporting the government, supporting the republic. And in other cities across Iran, huge support for the Islamic Republic. And they just, pretend it doesn't exist, that they don't need to. I mean, it's another major failure of intelligence driven by hubris, that, all of these countries, they're just weak and we can easily topple them. And that's, I'm afraid, a great weakness in Western intelligence.
Do the Israelis and do the Americans recognize that Iran could obliterate Israel?
I think they have I think this has got, there are divided views about this in the Pentagon. There are ones that say, yes, it is, Israel could not survive this war, based on the evidence, not on supposition, but based on the evidence of what was occurring in the 12-day war. Israel was attacked like it has never been attacked before and sustained real damage. But I think there are others, others of these, particularly these people going on television and saying, well, I mean, they don't, they're missiles and old and they don't really work and we'll just shoot them down and it's no problem. So I think there are different sort of views. The latter views are just based on emotive thinking. I mean, not thinking, just emotivism. This is, oh gosh, I mean, how could Iran challenge, our missile systems? Well, that's the new world that you live in, Mr. Pentagon, because, Chinese can do this. Russia is doing this. And Iran isn't backwards. It's not some country that is going backwards. I remember in 2006, this is a true case. I was in Lebanon during the war, 2006 war between Hezbollah and Israel. And at one point, Hezbollah almost sank the latest Israeli frigate. They fired a surface-to-ship missile at it that nearly sank it. And afterwards, there was an inquiry in Israel. And the naval commander, who was responsible, was asked, why did you have no defenses? Why had you not triggered your defense systems on the ship? They were inert. You hadn't switched them on. He said, that's because the Israeli intelligence told us that Hezbollah lived in caves and rode donkeys. I mean, that was the extent of it. And you can look it up. That was the evidence given. We were told that Hezbollah were sort of barefooted nomads living in caves and riding on donkeys. And they paid the price.